All right, so in the last one we touched on how Peano's arithmetic uses this basically to indicate that 1 is the successor of 0. And I pointed out that the problem is this gives us more properly something like this. So the conventional is 0 plus 1 equals 0. But what I'm saying is what we should be looking at is the unordered list containing 0 and positive 1 just yields positive 1 because positive 1 is the only thing in there that's actually, like, we can do anything with. So there's some interesting things about this though, right? So if we had, like, 2 plus 3, we could change that into 3 plus 2, right? So we either get the list positive 2, positive 3, or the list positive 3, positive 2. Okay? So this unordered list, 0, positive 1, it should correlate to 1 plus 0. Right? So that would be the specific list ordering, positive 1, 0. But notice what's happening here. We're getting a positive on the 0? That doesn't even make fucking sense. Which means that if we were rigorous, then we wouldn't only have problems with, like, ln of 0 being undefined, or division by 0 being undefined, but we would also have addition of 0 being undefined. That's where we should be, if we're being correct about this. This is a consequence of thinking about things correctly. Adding 0 does not make any fucking sense. It's nonsense. It's undefined. It should be undefined. Right? But that's not where we are. That's not where conventional mathematics sits. We're totally comfortable dealing with this. Dealing with adding 0. Right? This doesn't pose problems. So why does this? Why does this? It's because you don't know what you're doing. Here, nothing happens. Right? Well, and what I'm saying... Well, don't hold the shift key when I do that. What I was saying in previous instances... God, I speak too many languages. Okay. 0 to the first power, or the positive first power, should give us 0, right? Because what it is it's 1 times 0, which gives us 0. 0 to the negative 1, I'm saying that should tentatively equal 0. Like, your first assumption should be that that's probably 0. What's happening here is that it's definitely 1 divided by 0. And I'm saying that we should think of that as that's probably going to return a 0. The reason that I'm saying that is not tied up in conventional computational methods, because we already know that conventional computational methods, conventional algorithms, don't yield anything. We don't get a result when we use them. So this is, yeah, that's why I'm using this symbol right here, this squiggly, the tilde, instead of an equal sign. What I'm meaning by that right here is that it can be anything. It actually can be. It can simultaneously be everything. It can be nothing. It can be 4. It can be 4 and 7. It can be everything but 4 and 7. Like, don't know. But your naive assumption when you see this, your first guess, should probably be that it's 0. And as far as first guesses, though, that's more likely to come out to be right than not. And this is very similar to how we treat 1 plus 1 equals 2. Alright, as a first guess, 1 plus 1 equals 2 is very, very reasonable. In the real world, the way that we deal with things, when we're interacting with people who are like setting up problems for us, and what we're doing is we're already working in commensurate units, 1 plus 1 will be 2 very, very reliably, so we should just assume that 1 plus 1 is 2. That's basically what I'm saying here. We should just assume that 1 divided by 0 is 0, unless we have some other reason to think that, right? So like 1x plus 1y is not 2. That's true, and we're totally comfortable handling that. But, in general, naively speaking, when we see 1 plus 1, we'll treat it as 2. That's all I'm saying here. We should, if we're going to have that behavior with 1 plus 1, we should have this behavior with 1 divided by 0. Or anything divided by 0. And a similar argument goes for I. Right? So again, that should be, we should just treat that as 0 generically. Because what's happening is we're operating in a perpendicular dimension, but we could just rotate our reference frame. And now it should be 0. If you rotate your reference frame correctly, if you do it the right way, it should be 0. Right? So treating those things as undefined, it's not helpful, and it's also not warranted, because if you look at a graph of the ln of x, it doesn't exist at 0. So trying to use that as some way of figuring out what ln of 0 would be is just retarded. It doesn't make sense. ln of 0 doesn't occur. It's not a thing. It doesn't make any sense. There is no power you can raise e to which will yield 0 as its result. So this is not an approach that makes sense. Taking the limit of it still doesn't help you because, right, when you take the limit as x approaches 0 from the positive side of ln of x, what you're doing is you're finding the ln of L of 0. L of 0 is not 0. Right? This yields negative infinity. But that didn't actually tell us anything about the ln of 0. And the same thing applies for one on 0, right? So what this is this isn't, we're not analyzing 1 on 0, we're analyzing 1 on L of 0. And this one is positive infinity. Right? That's what's happening here. Right? So when we're looking at this shit and we come up with undefined for these things, if we're being rigorous, we should also treat addition of 0 as undefined. Because logically it doesn't make sense, because that's not an operation, it's a sign on the following number, and this is not a number, and it cannot take a sign. So this whole part of this entire thing doesn't make any fucking sense. The only correct way to notate this is to note that these are independent elements in a list. It's not positive 0. We're not adding 0. You can't. 0 can be in your list, but if 0 is in your list, you can ignore it. Right? So this is another place where the notation is broken. Because this does not make any fucking sense. This plus 0 properly speaking, is undefined. Just as 1 on 0 is undefined. Just as ln of 0 is undefined. Just as a whole bunch of other shit regarding 0 is undefined, because 0 fundamentally is not a number. If you notice, a bunch of the undefined shit, pretty much all of the undefined shit that occurs in mathematics, relates to 0. That's not a coincidence. That's telling you something about 0. 0 has a special nature that is different from everything else. I'm not sure where to go from there, so here.